All right, welcome to our lesson on inequalities. I need you to read and write inequalities and graph them on a number line. So we're not doing big graphs, just number lines. You're probably wondering what inequalities are, but they're things you've learned before. All right, now your warm-up's going to be a little bit of a trick at trying to challenge you today to be able to solve these. These are two-step equations, stuff we haven't totally got into yet, but I want to see how well you can do at this before we even get into it. So don't try too hard. Give it your best shot. When you come back, I'll explain how to answer all of these with you. So now that you've tried them, let's kind of go through these. So first thing is just like any other problem that we've done like this, you have to just move like terms. Well, we see that we have something with a variable of z and something of a variable of z on both sides. What if we tried to move negative 21z to the other side? Well, if it's minus here, the only way to get rid of it is to do the opposite, which is add. And if we add 21z to 27z, a negative 27z, excuse me, we're going to be left with 12 on this side. And here we're going to be left with negative 6z. Now we got to get z alone, so we have to get rid of the negative 6. So we divide, because that's the opposite of multiplying. And we divide both sides by negative 6. Now we're left with z. And 6 goes into 12 twice. However, we have a negative divided by a positive, so it's a negative 2z. Quite a 2z, or doozy. All right, for number 2, we got to bring negative 12n over by negative 6n. So the only way to get rid of the negative is make it a positive n, and a positive on both sides. Negative 6 plus 12 on the one side gives us negative 6n, and we're left with negative 18 on this side. So we got to get n alone, so we have to divide by negative 6. What we do to one side, we do to the other. Divide negative 6 to both sides. Now you're left with negative 6 divided by negative 18. Since both are negative, you're going to get a positive 3. See, hopefully you're catching on. Maybe you're seeing your mistakes now. Let's do number 3. We got to get 12y over by 8y. Well, 12y is positive, but the way to get rid of the positive is make it a negative 12y. That cancels out. What you do to one side, you do to the other. And now you're left with negative 56 equals, and here we have a negative 12 and 8, so it's the same as saying what's 12 minus 8, which would give you 4, but it's a negative 4y. And again, to get rid of negative 4 and get y alone, you got to divide both sides by negative 4. And 4 goes into negative 6. 4 goes into 5 once, with 1 left over, and 4 goes into 16 4 times, and it's positive because both are negative. All right, one more. We've got to bring the negative 36 to the other side, so that means we have to add 36k, add 36k, and now we have a larger positive than a negative, so we're left with a positive 18k, because 36 minus 18 gives you 18k, and we still have the 9 on the other side. So now we have to divide both sides by 18, divide both sides by 18, and now you're left with k equaling, well, it's going to be a fraction, because the numerator is smaller than the denominator. What can you divide 9 and 18 by? You can divide them both by 9, and that gives you 1/2. So those are the answers you should have gotten for these 4 warm-ups. If you actually got all 4 of these right, come on over and give me a high five. All right, so let's talk about this word inequality. An inequality states that two quantities are either not equal or may not be equal. So the symbols we usually use are less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. Now you might know these, but I do want you to add this table in your box or in your notes. Add this box in your notes, especially the word phrases, words that you normally see. This will help you with word problems, so you know what the right symbols are to use. Come back when you got this done. So, the other things I want us to talk about are specific inequalities, which are algebraic. Algebraic are quantities where you're going to be looking at variables. Remember, those are letters, and numbers. So those are the things you're going to be looking at. An inequality may have more than one solution. And together, if you look at all the solutions, they're called a solution set. I also want you to have that written down. And a compound inequality is the result of combining two different equalities with the words and or. So you might be looking at the way two different numbers react with a variable, or how two variables react with a number. You'll see what I mean as we get into our examples today. Make sure you have these written down before moving on. So let's look at our first example, and what we're going to look at here in example 1 is some real simple things, looking at numbers and words and trying to figure out what the situation is trying to show us. So in letter A, we're looking at something that says there are at least 15 people in the waiting room. Okay, so what are we actually looking at? Well, we're looking at the number of people, and it says they are at least 15 people in a waiting room. So if we go back here, we can see if we ever see at least, that means that we're doing greater than or equal to. So the number of people are greater than or equal to 15. I could, in this scenario, also tell you, try to write it with a variable. So we could say the variable n is used to equal the number of people, and you could write it as n is greater than or equal to 15. For letter B, we see the tram attendant will allow no more than 60 people on the train. If you look at your table, you'll see that no more than means less than or equal to the number that we have, which is 60. Now again, we could use n to use a variable as well. So we can write these as algebraic inequalities just as easily as regular inequalities. All I did is I changed the words to a variable. Get these written down before moving on. All right, you have 3 of these that I want you to try on your own. You're going to write an inequality for each situation. Use that table I told you to write down to answer these 3 questions. Come back when you're done. Okay, so here are the answers you should have gotten. And I will be honest, to figure out how to do the less than or equal to, the less than sign, and then the greater than sign respectively for each problem, I went back and I looked at the table and the notes that I have that I've made you guys write. That's how I was able to figure these out. They're all right in that problem. So if you got all 3 of these right, come on over and give me a fist pound. All right, so now let's look at how you can graph inequalities. So graphing inequalities on a number line is pretty simple once you get down the practice of it. So for A, it's showing us that n is less than 3. So to draw this, what we have to do is first figure out how to draw a number line. Well, I always do a couple above, or maybe one above at least the number we see here, and then a few below depending on the symbol. So for here, what we did is here's where 3 is, okay? And because it's less than, any number that we're looking at is going to be less than 3, the arrow has to go to the left. Less than equals left. Now, I chose an open circle here, and there's a reason for that. Okay? That's the number I feel was best represented because we don't have an equal to sign under it. So when we don't have an equal to sign and it's just less than or greater than, you keep an open circle. Now, since any number can be less than 3, it has to be open because you can't choose 3. It's got to be any number less. So you draw a line with the arrow pointing less. Now for B, I couldn't quite figure out how to get this one to work right. So it says less than equal to, but that's not the proper way to write it. Or I'm sorry, greater than. You should write it like this. Okay? So let me fix that for you so you're not confused. So this one says that A is greater than or equal to 24. And even there is a mistake. I'm sorry. The graphics on this have changed on me. I apologize. I take full blame for it. So let's get rid of that 2 as well. Okay. So A is greater than or equal to 4. Now in this scenario, when I draw the number line, and it should be -4. All right, we're just moving on. You'll see that because it's greater than or equal to, I filled in the circle. Okay? And because it's greater than -4, you go up the number line from -4 up. Now you don't have to make the number line really long. You don't even need to make it this long. You could just use like 3 numbers. So a couple things I want you to add to your notes on this page. okay? If it's just this or this, it's an open mark. If it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, you have a filled in mark. Okay? And remember, less, oops, let's actually write properly here. Less to the left will help you to identify which way to go. Okay? And obviously that would mean right to right. Okay? Just a couple extra notes that'll help you keep you organized and make sure you have the right answer. All right, so I'm going to want you guys to draw number lines for 4, 5, 6, and 7. And to help you out, I'll do number 4 for you. Remember, you find out what the number is and you look at which way it's going. Well, it's going to say x is less than 3. So it's got to be at least a number line from 4, 3, and then we go down 2, 1, 0, and I'll just say -1. Now once you have that, you see it doesn't have an equal to sign, so we're going to make an open circle at 3, and because it's less to the left. Okay? Go ahead and do your own. So here are the answers that you should have gotten. So remember, you first find out what the number is. Then from there, you got to find out the variable and figure out which way the variable has the label pointing towards it. So if you look at number 4, we did that one. X had the less than symbol next to it, so we had to go less. But we made our circle at 3. So at 5, we had 1/2, so I drew a circle. And I saw that the symbol was an equal to sign, so I had to make a full circle. And then I saw that it's R that we're looking at. The R side is actually less. As you can see here, the less symbol's there. So I had to make the arrow go to the left. For number 6, 2.8. So that's where I'm going to put the open circle because you can see it doesn't have an equal to sign. The W is on the greater side, so that means that we're going to be going greater. And then 7 is y is greater than or equal to -4. So we start at -4. There's the equal to sign. That's why I filled it in. And then y is on the greater side, so it opens up. So you should have got them all correct if you followed the labels that you see correctly. And finally, we're going to look at compound inequalities. So remember, these are ones that can be have variables, and they're going to have or and words included. So if we look at A here, you can see that we have m is less than or equal to -2, or m is greater than 1. Now because we have the word or, that means we're going to want to graph the solutions going different directions. So the first thing we want to do is just graph the first part, which is m is less than or equal to -2. So because it's a less than or equal to, we have to fill in the full circle and put it at -2. And m is less, so the arrow points to the left. Now, we can put these on the same graph. I just did these separately, so that you can see that next is m is greater than 1. So we put an open circle at 1 because it doesn't have an equal to sign. M is on the greater side, so that means it's going to go on the greater. So you can graph them as individuals, or as you can see down here, this is graphing them as a common solution, meaning they can be read as one whole problem, so put them on the same number line. That usually is easier anyways, because then you just have to draw one number line. So if anything, at least make sure you include this in your notes. If you want to draw them separately, you can. I'm just trying to show you how they each can stand on their own, or you draw them as a common solution. All right, so here we are on the last example, or the next example. That's the last one from previous one. But here we can see one. This is definitely a compound inequality, or compound inequality, yeah, because they're both sharing the same variable, and that variable is b. So when you have a problem like this, the best way to solve this is just to graph them on the same number line. So they're both going to share b. That's the key here, okay? So what we need to do is we need to first draw a dot at -3 and a dot at 0. Here's -3. Here's 0. And then from there, we just have to look at what it's showing us next to the variable. Well, on this side, -3 is going to be greater than, or b is going to be greater than -3. So that means it has to go to the right because it's greater. But over here with 0, b is actually less than. So in this scenario, they both are going to connect the lines together. That's considered a common solution of that compound inequality. You draw it as one piece. I don't know what all this is here, but this is what you should be looking at. So make sure you have this example in because it's a good one of a compound inequality where they both share the same variable. All right, it's your turn. I want you to try these together. Now this one, you're going to have a little gap. These two are going to be on the same line. We'll see how you do drawing these. Come back when you're done. We'll see how you did. All right, so here are the answers to 8, 9, and 10. So 8's at or, so that's kind of a giveaway that's going to point different directions. Plus you can see the A is greater than at 2, or yep, greater, so we keep it open at 2. It's got to go that way. Here at -1, it's greater. It's an equal to symbol, so we fill it in, but A is less than, so it's got to go that way. Down here is 9. As you can see, P is going to be greater than after -4. -4 greater than goes this way. P is going to be a negative or a less than at 6, so it's got to go this way, so they connect. And for 10, -2 was a less than or equal to sign, so we filled it all the way in. Here, 0 is at just a greater than sign there. We can see n is greater than -2, so it's got to go to the right. But n is also less than 0, so they connect here. So if you got those right, come on over and give me a high five. All right, here is your box of thought. 2 questions. Make sure you use full sentences. And here is your quiz. 5 questions. 2 are graphing. The other ones are writing your own inequalities for them. And I challenge you, try to write a variable with those inequalities. Okay, that's it for this lesson. We'll see you.